My son said, "I sold your house to pay for a vacation for me and my wife. You have 1 day to pack your things." I just smiled. He didn't know that the house wasn't actually mine to sell. But in that frozen moment, staring at the man who used to hold my hand while crossing the street, I didn't say a word. I just let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating, while my heart quietly broke into pieces. I never imagined my golden years would begin with such a sharp betrayal. For 37 years, I had lived in this 2-story colonial house on Maple Street. It was the backdrop of my entire adult life. It was where I raised Caleb, where I bandaged scraped knees on the front porch, and where his father, Arthur, and I had celebrated countless Christmases. Every creaking floorboard on the second floor held a memory. The scent of old wood and vanilla in the kitchen wasn't just a smell. It was a time machine. After Arthur passed 5 years ago, the house became both my sanctuary and my burden. It was arguably too big for one person, sure, but it was filled with a lifetime I wasn't ready to abandon. It was the only place where I could still feel Arthur's presence, lingering in the quiet corners of the study or the way the morning light hit the breakfast table. Caleb had always been my pride. He was a successful financial consultant, or so I thought. He was married to Sierra, a real estate agent with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a smile that was bright but never quite reached her eyes. They lived 40 minutes away in a sleek, modern townhouse that smelled of cleaning chemicals and expensive candles. Our relationship had always been cordial. Sunday dinners once a month, birthday calls, the usual dance of adult children with busy lives. But 6 months ago, the rhythm changed. Something shifted. It started small, almost imperceptible. Caleb began asking questions about the house, questions that seemed innocent at first. "Mom, have you thought about downsizing? This place must be a nightmare to heat in the winter. Wouldn't a nice condo be easier? No stairs." I would laugh them off, changing the subject to his work, his life, anything else. But then the visits increased. Caleb and Sierra would drop by unannounced. Sierra's sharp, appraising eyes would sweep over every room like she was already measuring for new furniture. She wouldn't ask how I was, she would comment on the property. "That kitchen is terribly outdated, Alina," she'd say, running a manicured fingernail along my countertop. "And the heating system, it's inefficient. The property taxes alone must be bleeding you dry." I felt scrutinized in my own home, like a specimen under glass. "We're just worried about you, Mom," Caleb would say, his voice dripping with a concern that felt manufactured. "A woman your age, all alone in this big house? What if you fall? What if something happens and no one knows?" I was 68, not 90. I still maintained a prize-winning garden. I drove myself to my book club every Thursday, and I volunteered at the library twice a week. But they spoke to me like I was already senile, already helpless. The phone calls became more frequent, too. Caleb would call late at night, his voice tight. Had I considered a reverse mortgage? Had I updated my will? Did I have a healthcare proxy? They weren't asking about my health. They were taking inventory. Then came that Tuesday afternoon in October. I was in the front garden, deadheading the last of the autumn roses, trying to prepare the bushes for the coming winter. The air was crisp, smelling of dried leaves. I heard the car pull up, Caleb's silver sedan. He climbed out alone. No Sierra this time, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach at the expression on his face. It wasn't concern. It wasn't worry. It was something harder, something final. "Mom, we need to talk." He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked past me, marching straight into the house with his shoes on. I followed him inside, wiping soil from my hands onto my jeans, my heart suddenly racing. He stood in the center of my living room, the same living room where I had rocked him to sleep when he had colic, the same room where he'd opened his college acceptance letter. The words came out flat, rehearsed. "I sold your house to pay for our vacation. You have 1 day to pack your things." The world tilted on its axis. I actually gripped the back of Arthur's old velvet armchair to steady myself. What? "Sierra and I have been planning a trip to the Maldives for our 10th anniversary, he said, as if he were explaining why he was late for dinner. "We deserve it. After everything we've been through, we deserve a break. The sale closes tomorrow. The new owners want to move in by the weekend. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. How could he? When did he? Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mom, Caleb continued, avoiding my eyes now. He pulled a glossy pamphlet from his jacket pocket and placed it on the coffee table. We found you a nice spot. Sunset Gardens Senior Living, 1 bedroom, all utilities included. You'll be much happier there. Safer. Safer, that word again. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger. When had this happened? When had my boy, my sweet boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them bouquets, become this cold, calculating man standing in my home, telling me he'd stolen it from under me? He checked his watch, looking annoyed that I hadn't immediately thanked him. I have to go. I'll send the movers tomorrow at noon. Be ready. And just like that, he walked out. He didn't hug me. He didn't look back. He got in his expensive car and drove away, believing he had won. Believing I was just a confused old woman who would do as she was told. I sat down in Arthur's chair, the silence of the house wrapping around me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly terrified. I sat in Arthur's armchair for exactly 20 minutes. The shock washed over me like ice water. My hands were trembling so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. My chest felt tight, a physical weight pressing down on my lungs. Had my own son really just tried to sell my house without my permission? Had he really stood in this living room, where he used to build blanket forts, and told me to pack my life into boxes because he wanted a vacation? The audacity of it was almost impressive. Where did I go wrong? I wondered, a tear finally escaping and tracking down my cheek. Was I too soft? Did I spoil him? But as the minutes ticked by, the grandfather clock in the hall marking time, the shock began to recede, replaced by something hotter, something sharper. Panic wouldn't help me now. Tears wouldn't save my home. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, in, out. I needed to understand what had actually happened. Because one thing was certain, Caleb believed he had succeeded. He had walked out of here confident, almost smug. He thought I was helpless. He thought I was a technologically illiterate old woman who would just roll over and accept her fate. I stood up, wiping my face. Not today, Caleb, I whispered to the empty room. I went to the study and pulled out my laptop. Yes, I owned a laptop, and I knew how to use it quite well, despite what my son seemed to think. I sat down and began searching for property records. It took me 40 minutes and 3 transfer calls, but I finally reached a clerk at the county recorder's office who was willing to help. Ma'am, let me check the parcel number, the clerk said, the clicking of a keyboard audible over the phone. Okay, here we are, 247 Maple Street. According to our records, the deed is held in a living trust. My heart hammered against my ribs. Can you tell me the name of the trust? It's the Vance Family Trust, established in 2021. You, Eleanor Vance, are listed as the sole trustee. I closed my eyes, a grim smile touching my lips. Thank you. I hung up the phone. Of course. Arthur and I had set up the trust 3 years before he died, following our estate attorney's advice to avoid probate. The house wasn't in my name directly, it was in the trust. I was the controlling trustee. Caleb was the beneficiary, yes, but only upon my death. The realization hit me with crystal clarity. Caleb couldn't sell the house. He had no legal authority. Without my signature, he couldn't transfer the deed. So what was happening? Had he forged documents? Had he lied to a buyer, taking a deposit on a house he didn't own? Or was this all an elaborate, cruel bluff to frighten me into signing the house over to him voluntarily? I needed to know more. I needed to understand the why. A vacation to the Maldives was expensive, yes, but to risk prison for it, to evict his own mother, it didn't add up. That evening, I did something I had never done before. I called Caleb's colleague, Marcus Wu. I had met Marcus several times at company holiday parties. He was a decent man, always respectful, always kind to me. Mrs. Vance, Marcus answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. Is everything okay? Hello, Marcus. I apologize for calling you on your personal line. I kept my voice steady, though my stomach was churning. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Caleb been acting strangely at work lately? Money troubles, unusual behavior. Anything. There was a long pause on the other end. Too long. Mrs. Vance, I probably shouldn't say this, Marcus began, his voice dropping to a whisper. But Caleb is in trouble. He took out a significant loan last month. He told the partners it was for a business investment, but, well, the deal fell through. There's been talk. Some people think he's in over his head. Deeply. My stomach dropped. How significant, Marcus? 6 figures. And Mrs. Vance. His biggest client threatened to leave last week because Caleb has been missing deadlines. He's desperate. I thanked Marcus and ended the call, my mind racing. Caleb was drowning. He was in serious financial trouble. And instead of coming to me, instead of being honest with his mother and asking for help, he had decided to steal my home. But why the vacation story? Why the Maldives? I opened my laptop again and navigated to Facebook. Another thing my son assumed I didn't know how to use. I went to Sierra's profile. It was public, of course. Sierra lived for the audience. Her feed was a curated exhibition of a life that looked perfect. Photos of designer handbags, brunch at expensive restaurants, inspirational quotes about manifesting abundance. I scrolled back through the last 6 months, and there it was. Dozens of posts. Counting down the days to paradise. Maldives' 10-year anniversary. So blessed to have a husband who spoils me. First class all the way. Luxury travel, dreaming of overwater bungalows. They had been planning this for months. They had been posting about it, bragging about it to their friends, building expectations. They had sold a lie to the world, and now they couldn't afford to pay for it. I sat back, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. This wasn't just about financial desperation. This was about image. This was about Sierra's perfect Instagram life. They had decided that my home, my security, and my memories were worth less than their vacation photos. They were willing to make me homeless so they wouldn't have to admit to their friends that they were broke. That was the moment the tears stopped for good. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't move into Sunset Gardens while they sipped cocktails on a beach paid for with my stolen equity. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, but knew by heart. Loretta Higgins. She was the toughest estate attorney in 3 counties, and she had been Arthur's law school roommate 40 years ago. She took no prisoners, and she had a particular hatred for bullies. Loretta, I said when she answered, my voice no longer trembling. I need your help. My son just tried to steal my house. Loretta Higgins arrived at 9:00 a.m. sharp, her car pulling into the driveway with the precision of a military operation. I had known Loretta for over 40 years, ever since she and Arthur studied together at Georgetown Law. Even back then, she was a force of nature, brilliant, sharp-tongued, and fiercely loyal. Now, in her late 60s, she was a silver-haired lioness in a tailored navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen more courtroom battles than I had seen hot dinners. She didn't hug me when I opened the door. She just looked at me with eyes that missed nothing. Coffee, black, then tell me everything. We sat in the living room, the same room where Caleb had delivered his ultimatum less than 24 hours ago. As I walked her through the timeline, the questions, the visits, the phone calls, and finally, the demand to pack, Loretta's jaw tightened. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching aggressively against the paper. He can't sell it, Alina, she said, tapping the pen against the pad. I checked the filings this morning before I came over. The Vance Family Trust is ironclad. You are the sole trustee, unless he forged your signature on a deed transfer, which is a felony, by the way. He has no legal leg to stand on. Then why? I asked, my hands wrapping around my warm mug for comfort. Why send movers? Why tell me I have 1 day? Intimidation, Loretta said, her voice hard. He's bluffing. He's betting that you'll be too scared, too confused, or too heartbroken to check the facts. He wants you to sign over the house voluntarily under duress. If you move out today, he establishes control over the property. Possession is 9/10 of the law, or so the saying goes. She opened her laptop on my coffee table, turning my cozy living room into a command center. We sit tight. If he's filed anything with the county, we'll know. While Loretta worked, I tried to steady my nerves. The house felt different today, not like a sanctuary, but like a fortress under siege. Then my phone buzzed on the table, a text from Caleb. "Mom, have you started packing? The movers will be there at 3 p.m. Don't make this difficult." My heart leaped into my throat. I showed the screen to Loretta, my hand shaking. What do I do? Do I tell him I know? No, Loretta said, placing a calming hand on my arm. Don't respond. Silence is terrifying to a man who thinks he's in control. Let them show up. If movers actually come, I'll handle it. The waiting was agony. The hours crawled by. I paced the kitchen. I watered plants that didn't need water. I watched the clock. 1:00 p.m., 2:00 p.m., 2:30 p.m. At 2:45 p.m., a large white van rumbled down Maple Street. My stomach turned over. It slowed down and pulled up to my curb. The side of the truck read "Reliable Movers" in chipped blue letters. Two men climbed out, checking a clipboard. One was older, looking tired. The other was young and chewing gum. I watched from behind the lace curtains, my breath hitching. They're here, Loretta. Stay here, she ordered, standing up and buttoning her blazer. Let them knock. The knock came, 3 sharp raps on the heavy oak door. I stood frozen in the hallway, out of sight, listening. Loretta opened the door. Good afternoon, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it projected authority like a gavel strike. Can I help you? Yeah, we're here for the move, the older man said. Order for Vance, 247 Maple. I am Sarah Morrison, legal counsel for Mrs. Alina Vance, the owner of this property, Loretta said, her tone icy. May I see your work order? There was a confused silence. I heard paper rustling. Says here Caleb Vance booked it, the mover said, sounding defensive. Look, lady, we just drive the truck. I understand, Loretta replied. However, this work order was placed by an individual who has no legal authority to initiate a move from this property. This house is held in a trust. Mrs. Vance has not authorized any move. She is not vacating the premises, and she certainly did not hire you. But the guy said. The guy lied, Loretta cut him off. If you attempt to enter this home or remove a single item, you will be aiding and abetting a fraudulent eviction. I suggest you call Mr. Vance for your cancellation fee because you won't be moving anything from this address today. The movers exchanged glances. They didn't get paid enough for legal drama. All right, the older man grumbled. We're leaving, sheesh. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But as the moving van pulled away from the curb, another car turned onto the street. Caleb's silver sedan. He must have gotten a call from the movers. He parked haphazardly behind the departing van, almost clipping its bumper. I watched my son climb out of the car, his face already flushed red with anger. Sierra climbed out of the passenger side, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching her designer bag like a shield. She looked furious. Here we go, Loretta said, stepping out onto the porch. Alina, stand behind me, be strong. I straightened my spine. I thought of Arthur, I thought of the Maldives, and I stepped into the doorway. Caleb marched up the walkway, his footsteps heavy with rage. Sierra trailed behind him, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. What is going on? Caleb shouted before he even reached the steps. Why are the movers leaving? Mom, what are you doing? Loretta stood at the top of the porch steps, blocking his path like a stone sentinel. Mr. Vance, she said calmly. Mrs. Vance. Caleb stopped short, looking at Loretta with confusion that quickly curdled into hostility. Who the hell are you? I am Loretta Higgins. I'm representing your mother, Alina Vance. Loretta's voice was dangerously low. And I need to inform you that any attempt to remove property from this house, or to claim ownership of it without Mrs. Vance's written consent, constitutes attempted fraud and elder abuse. Caleb's face went white. He looked past Loretta, his eyes locking onto mine in the doorway. Mom, what is this? You got a lawyer. I stepped out from behind Loretta. My legs felt weak, but my voice, to my surprise, was steady. Loretta is my attorney, Caleb, and she's here because you tried to sell my house without my permission. I was helping you. Caleb's voice rose to a shout, his composure cracking. He threw his hands up, performing for the neighbors who might be watching. You can't take care of this place anymore. It's too big. You're putting yourself in danger living here alone. That is not your decision to make, Loretta cut in coldly. Mrs. Vance is of sound mind. She is perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. What you have attempted here, hearing movers, lying about a sale, is illegal. Sierra grabbed Caleb's arm, whispering something urgent in his ear, her eyes darting between Loretta and me. But Caleb shook her off. I'm your son, he yelled at me, ignoring Loretta. I'm the only family you have left. Everything you have should be mine anyway. You're just being selfish, holding on to this house when we need. He stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. He realized too late what he had almost said. I looked at him, feeling a profound sadness wash over the anger. When you need what asterisk, Caleb? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He looked down at his shoes. Money, I pressed, stepping forward. Money for your Maldives vacation. Money to cover the 6-figure loan you took out at work. Caleb's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. How did you? Sierra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I may be 68, Caleb, but I'm not senile, I said, my voice hardening. I can still make phone calls. I can still do research. I know about the debt. I know about the vacation you've been bragging about on Facebook for months. You've been spying on us, Caleb stammered, deflecting. I've been protecting myself, I shot back. You tried to make me homeless for a beach resort. You stood in my living room and lied to my face. Mom, that's not, we were going to take care of you, he pleaded, his tone shifting from anger to desperation. The assisted living place is nice, really nice. A 1-bedroom facility where I'd lose my independence, my garden, and my memories, I said. Also, you and Sierra could post photos from an overwater bungalow paid for with my equity. Sierra finally snapped. Her cool, realtor mask crumbled, revealing the ugly entitlement underneath. Maybe if you weren't so stubborn about accepting help, we wouldn't have had to, she shrieked, her face twisting. Had to what? Loretta interrupted, stepping forward so she was inches from the stairs. Commit elder fraud, because that is exactly what this is, Mrs. Vance, and I have everything documented now. The text messages, the moving company work order, the financial records. Caleb looked at Loretta, then at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes, not remorse fear, fear of consequences, fear of exposure. You're making a mistake, Mom, he said, his voice shaking. You're trusting a stranger over your own blood. Loretta is not a stranger, I said. She's a friend, and right now she's the only one acting like family. Get off the property, Loretta commanded. Now, or I call the police and file a trespassing report. Caleb opened his mouth to argue, but the fight had drained out of him. He looked at the house, my house, one last time, realizing he had lost. Let's go, he muttered to Sierra. But Caleb, Sierra started. I said let's go. They turned and walked back to their car. It wasn't the confident stride of the day before. It was a retreat. I watched them drive away, the silence of the neighborhood settling back in. My knees finally gave out, and I had to sit on the porch bench. Loretta sat down beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did well, Alina, she said softly. Very well. Is it over? I asked, looking at the empty street. Loretta shook her head grimly. No, this was just the first skirmish. They're desperate and they're in deep debt. People like that don't give up easily. They're going to escalate. I took a deep breath, smelling the autumn roses I had pruned yesterday. Let them, I said, surprised by my own strength. I'm ready. We need proof of motive, Loretta said the next morning over coffee. The judge will see the attempted sale as illegal, yes, but to truly stop them, we need to show asterisk why they are so desperate. We need to prove this wasn't about your safety, but about their greed. I tapped my fingers on the kitchen table, thinking. Financial records. Hard to get without a court order, Loretta sighed. Unless. A memory sparked. Wait, when Caleb was a junior in college, he needed a credit card to build history. I co-signed for it. It was a platinum rewards card. Loretta raised an eyebrow. Did he ever close it? I don't think so. He just moved on to other cards. But as a co-signer, I'm legally liable for the debt. That means I have right of access. 3 days later, the documents arrived via express mail. My dining room table, usually reserved for holiday roasts and puzzles, was transformed into a war room. It was covered in bank statements, credit card bills, and loan applications. The picture they painted was devastating. It wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic. Caleb and Sierra were drowning. Their lifestyle, the sleek townhouse, the BMWs, the designer clothes Sierra flaunted, was a house of cards built on high-interest credit. They were rotating debt between cards, paying off one Visa with a MasterCard, digging the hole deeper every month. And then I found it, the smoking gun. Buried in the statement for the cosign card, a card Caleb clearly thought I had forgotten about, was a charge from 3 weeks ago. Tropical Dreams Luxury Resorts, $47,450. I stared at the number, feeling sick. They had already paid for the Maldives. They had charged nearly $50,000 to a credit card they couldn't pay off, gambling that they could sell my house quickly enough to cover the bill before the interest kicked in. I was photographing the evidence with my phone when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Caleb's silver sedan. But this time, Sierra stayed in the car, tapping furiously on her phone. Caleb stood on the porch next to a young man in a suit that looked a little too shiny, clutching a briefcase like a life preserver. Loretta, who had practically moved into my guest room, answered the door. "Mrs. Higgins," Caleb said, his voice tight and controlled. He looked tired. "This is my attorney, Julian Thorne. We're here to discuss a resolution." I joined Loretta at the door. Caleb's eyes met mine, and I saw something ugly there. Not remorse, resentment. He looked at me as if I were the one in the wrong for defending myself. "Mr. Thorne," Loretta said coolly. "I wasn't aware Mr. Vance had retained counsel." "As of yesterday," the young lawyer replied. He looked fresh out of law school, radiating a nervous energy. "My client would like to propose a compromise that would benefit everyone involved." "I'm listening," Loretta said, though her tone suggested she was doing no such thing. We moved to the living room. Julian opened his briefcase and laid out a document. "Mr. Vance recognizes there may have been some miscommunication regarding the property transfer," Julian began, smoothing his tie. "However, he maintains that Mrs. Vance is unable to safely maintain the house alone. He is proposing a joint ownership agreement." I listened as he explained the terms. Caleb would be added to the deed immediately. He would handle all maintenance and financial decisions, including the power to borrow against the equity for repairs. In exchange, I would be allowed to retain residency in the house for the remainder of my life. I let out a short, bitter laugh. It scratched my throat. "So," I said, looking at Julian, "I get to live in my own house, while Caleb controls everything, drains the equity, and makes all the decisions. That's your compromise." "Mom, I'm trying to help you," Caleb interrupted, leaning forward. "You don't understand finance. You don't understand the market. I can manage the assets." "Manage them like you manage your own," I asked sharply. Caleb froze. "Mr. Vance is a financial professional," Julian interjected, sounding offended. "His capability is not in question." "Isn't it?" I stood up and walked to the dining room table. I picked up the paper with the highlighted charge and walked back, slamming it down on the coffee table in front of the young lawyer. "Explain this, Mr. Thorne." Julian looked down. He read the line item, Tropical Dreams Luxury Resorts. "My son isn't trying to manage my assets," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "He's trying to steal my home equity to pay for a $47,000 vacation he has already charged to a credit card. A credit card asterisk I co-signed for." Julian blinked. He looked at the paper, then at Caleb. "Mr. Vance, you didn't mention this." "It's not relevant," Caleb snapped, his face turning crimson. That's a business expense, networking." "At a couple's resort in the Maldives?" Loretta asked dryly. "Nice work if you can get it." The front door burst open. Sierra couldn't wait in the car any longer. She stormed into the living room, her heels sinking into the carpet. "What is taking so long?" she demanded. Then she saw the paper on the table. Her eyes widened and then narrowed into slits. "You've been digging through our records," she screeched. "That is private." "It is a joint account," I said calmly, "and it shows exactly why you're here." "It doesn't matter," Sierra yelled, stepping into my personal space. The smell of her expensive perfume was overpowering. "If you loved your son, you'd want to help him. You'd want him to be happy. You're sitting on a gold mine all alone while we're struggling to keep up appearances." "Keep up appearances," I repeated, stunned by her admission. "That's what this is for, appearances." "We are your family," Sierra shouted, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. "Your only family. Are you really going to choose some lawyer over your own son?" "I'm choosing myself," I said quietly, "something I should have done months ago." Julian Thorne was frantically packing his briefcase. I think we're done here for today." Caleb stood up, vibrating with humiliation and anger. He looked at me, and the mask fell away completely. The concerned son was gone. "You stubborn old woman," he hissed. "You're going to regret this. You think this proves you're smart. It just proves you're paranoid." "Careful, Caleb," Loretta warned. "We'll prove you're incompetent," Caleb threatened, pointing a finger at my face. "We'll get doctors. We'll get the court involved. We'll get guardianship, and then I'll sell this place anyway, and you won't have a say in asterisk anything." "Threatening a senior citizen in front of witnesses," Loretta noted, pretending to write on her pad. "Add that to the pile, Julian. Good luck with the bar exam." Caleb grabbed Sierra's arm and dragged her out. Julian followed, muttering an apology that nobody heard. When the door slammed shut, the house fell silent, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Guardianship. "They're going to try it," Loretta said grimly. "That's the nuclear option." I took Loretta's advice and gave myself 3 days of rest. No legal papers, no confrontations. Just me, my garden, and the silence. But the silence was heavier now. The house felt emptier than it had since Arthur died. I found myself looking at the phone, waiting for it to ring, even though I knew who would be on the other end. The manipulation campaign began on the second day. It started with an email from Sierra. It wasn't angry this time, it was pitiful. "Dear Alina, asterisk. I've been crying for days, unable to sleep, thinking about how our family has been torn apart. I know things got heated yesterday, but you have to understand the pressure we are under. Caleb loves you so much. He's heartbroken. He feels like he's lost his mother. We just wanted to ensure you were safe. Why are you treating us like criminals? Please, can't we meet somewhere neutral? Just family, no lawyers. Love, Sierra." I forwarded it to Loretta without replying. "Classic," Loretta texted back. "DARVO, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Don't engage." Then came the flowers, an enormous bouquet of red roses, my favorite, delivered to the doorstep. The card read, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I love you. Can we please talk? Your loving son, Caleb." I put them in a vase because they were beautiful, but every time I looked at them, I felt a pang of guilt. Was I being too hard? He was my boy. Maybe he really was just desperate. Then the voicemails started. They swung wildly from tearful begging, asterisk, "Mom, please pick up, I miss you, asterisk," to angry accusations, asterisk, "That lawyer is brainwashing you. She just wants her billable hours. You're destroying this family." The isolation was working. It was grinding me down. I missed the Sunday dinners. I missed the illusion that everything was okay. I felt like a prisoner in my own fortress. On Thursday, I almost didn't go to my book club. I felt too fragile, but the thought of sitting in the empty house for another evening was unbearable. The Maple Street Literary Society had been meeting for 12 years. We were discussing a mystery novel, but I couldn't focus. I stared at my teacup, my hands trembling slightly. "Eleanor, honey," Beatrice B. Klein said softly. She was a retired nurse with sharp eyes and a warm heart. "You haven't turned a page in 10 minutes. Is everything all right?" I looked up at the circle of faces. Martha Gable, whose husband had been a police officer, June Whittaker, a retired social worker, women I had known for a decade. And I broke. I told them everything. The sale, the movers, the debt, the Maldives, the threat of guardianship. I sobbed into a napkin, expecting them to be shocked, or worse, to judge me for raising a son who would do such a thing. But they didn't judge. They leaned in. "Oh, honey," Martha said, her voice fierce. "My nephew tried something similar with his mother-in-law. It's the money. It makes them crazy." "You are doing exactly the right thing," B said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Don't let them guilt you. That email from Sierra, that's manipulation 101. They try to make you feel like the bad guy so you'll surrender." "They threatened guardianship?" June asked, her social worker mode activating. "That's serious, Eleanor, but it's also a common tactic when the financial abuse fails. They try to attack your capacity." "I feel so alone," I whispered. "You are not alone," Martha said firmly. "I'm coming over tomorrow to check your locks, and my husband still has friends on the force. We'll make sure they know to keep a patrol car passing by." June pulled a notepad from her purse. "And I'm taking you to a meeting on Saturday, at the community center." A meeting. A support group for seniors dealing with financial exploitation by family members. I went to the meeting on Saturday. It was in the basement of the community center, sitting on folding chairs in a circle. I was nervous, ashamed to be there. But then I listened. I met Walter, a 75-year-old man whose daughter had drained his savings, account claiming she was managing his investments. I met Evelyn, whose grandson had moved into her basement and refused to leave, terrorizing her until she signed over her car. "My son told me I was being selfish," Walter shared, his voice shaking. "He said I didn't need the money, and he did." "Mine told me I was going senile," Evelyn added. "Said no one would believe me." Their stories echoed mine so perfectly it was terrifying. I realized something profound in that basement. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a bad mother. I was a victim of a pattern. A pattern I could break. When I returned home that evening, my phone pinged with another email from Sierra. This one was colder. "Your silence speaks volumes, Eleanor. We tried to reach out. Don't come crying to us when you're all alone and that lawyer has taken all your money." I read it twice. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel afraid. I felt done. I pressed the delete button. I wasn't alone. I had Loretta. I had Martha, and June. I had Walter and Evelyn. I had my fortress. And I was ready for war. They came for me on a Sunday morning, exactly 3 weeks after their last attempt at contact. I was in the front garden, kneeling on my foam pad, pruning the hydrangeas before the frost set in. The morning air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and cut stems. For a brief moment, with the weak October sun warming my back and the familiar weight of the shears in my hand, I almost felt like myself again. I wasn't a victim or a litigant or a stubborn old woman. I was just a leaner. Then I heard car doors slam, 2 of them. I didn't look up immediately. I finished my cut with a deliberate snap, wiped my shears on my apron, and stood slowly, brushing the soil from my knees. Caleb's silver sedan was parked at the curb, but he wasn't alone. Parked directly behind him was a dark, nondescript SUV I didn't recognize. I stood silently as Caleb and Sierra walked up the driveway, followed closely by an older woman in a severe gray suit. She carried a thick clipboard and wore an expression of professional pity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Mom," Caleb said as they approached. His voice was gentle, modulated perfectly. It was his concerned son voice, the one he used when he wanted something. "We need to talk. Please just hear us out." I didn't invite them onto the porch. I stood my ground on the lawn, the garden shears still gripping my hand like a shield. "Who is this, Caleb?" I asked, my eyes sliding past him to the stranger. The woman stepped forward before he could answer, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Mrs. Vance, I'm Dr. Lydia Sterling. I'm a geriatric care specialist. Caleb asked me to come along today to help facilitate a conversation about your living situation. A doctor? They had brought a doctor to my home on a Sunday morning to declare me incompetent. The betrayal hit me fresh, a sharp pang in the chest, but I pushed it down. I didn't take her hand. I didn't agree to any assessment, Dr. Sterling. Of course not, and you don't have to, Dr. Sterling said smoothly, withdrawing her hand but keeping that condescending, sugary smile plastered on her face. But as a medical professional, I can tell you that many seniors don't realize when they need help. The signs can be subtle. Forgetting to pay bills, neglecting home maintenance, irrational suspicion of family members. Irrational suspicion, I repeated, keeping my voice dangerously calm. Is that the diagnosis you've already written on that clipboard? It's a symptom, Mrs. Vance, Dr. Sterling said, tapping the plastic backing with her pen. Paranoia regarding loved ones, the belief that your children are out to get you. It's a very common indicator of early-stage cognitive decline. It was a trap, a beautifully constructed, diabolical trap. If I got angry, I was unstable. If I yelled, I was aggressive. If I refused to speak, I was confused. I took a breath and looked directly at Caleb. He shifted his weight, looking at the hydrangeas rather than my eyes. I pay all my bills on time, I said clearly. My home is well maintained, and I am not paranoid. I am surrounded by people who actually care about my well-being. Sierra scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. You mean that vulture lawyer and your book club friends? Eleanor, we're trying to help you. We brought Dr. Sterling at our own expense because we're worried. Worried about what, Sierra? I asked, turning my gaze to her. Worried about your Maldives vacation being canceled. The words hung in the air like smoke. Caleb's jaw tightened. Mom, we canceled the trip, he said, looking pained. Okay, we canceled it, because our family is more important than any vacation. We took the loss. I almost believed him. For a split second, I saw the son I had raised, the boy with the scraped knees, the teenager who brought me coffee in bed on Mother's Day. But then I looked at Sierra. Her face wasn't sad, it was resentful. Her lips were pressed into a thin, angry line. Show me, I said. Caleb blinked. What? Show me the cancellation confirmation, I said, holding out my free hand. If you canceled the trip, you have an email, you have a refund receipt. Show it to me, right now. Caleb froze. He patted his pockets, pantomiming looking for a phone he clearly didn't want to produce. I don't have it on me. It's on my laptop at home. You have your phone in your hand, Caleb, I pointed out. Dr. Sterling cleared her throat, stepping between us. Mrs. Vance, this kind of demand, this fixation on proof, it really underscores the trust issues we're seeing. You're interrogating your son because your mind is fabricating a conspiracy to justify your hostility. The manipulation was so smooth, so professional, I felt a chill run down my spine. This woman was a hired gun. She was building a medical file on me in real time, twisting my defense into dementia. I appreciate your concern, Dr. Sterling, I said, my voice hardening into steel. But I am not experiencing cognitive decline. I am experiencing attempted financial exploitation by my son. I pulled my own phone from my apron pocket. Would you like to see the documented evidence? The moving company work order signed by Caleb. The credit card statement showing the $47,000 charge to Tropical Dreams Resort that was processed after he claims he canceled. Dr. Sterling's professional smile faltered. She blinked, looking uncertainly at Caleb. Mr. Vance. You've turned our mother against us, Sierra shouted, her composure finally snapping. With your lawyers and your accusations, we're trying to be a family and you're treating us like criminals. You committed a crime, I said, stepping forward. We made a mistake, Caleb screamed, his face turning an ugly shade of plum. The gentle son act evaporated instantly. A mistake. People make mistakes, Mom. But instead of forgiving us, instead of being a real mother, you're acting like we're monsters. You tried to evict me, I said. We needed help, Caleb roared, throwing his hands up. We were desperate. And you're sitting here on hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, living all alone in this massive shrine to Dad, while your only son is drowning. There it was, the truth, finally stripped of the safety lies. So it's my fault you're in debt, I asked quietly. My fault you chose to live beyond your means. My fault you booked a luxury vacation you couldn't afford. You're supposed to help your children, Sierra shrieked, stepping onto the grass, her heels sinking into the soft earth. That's what parents do. They sacrifice, they give. But you're just a selfish old woman clinging to a house you don't even need. Dr. Sterling looked between us, clearly regretting her involvement. She took a step back toward the driveway, clutching her clipboard to her chest. Get off my property, I said. All of you now. Or what? Caleb sneered, his face twisted with malice. You'll call your lawyer. No, I said. I'll just hand over the footage to the police. I raised my hand and pointed up to the eaves of the porch. A small, black camera lens stared back at them, blinking a tiny red light. My friend B's son-in-law installed that last week, I said, watching the blood drain from Caleb's face. It records audio and video, high definition. Dr. Sterling, I hope your assessment included the part where my son admitted he's drowning in debt and wants my equity. I'm sure the state medical board would find your participation in this ambush very interesting. Dr. Sterling turned pale. Mr. Vance, you didn't say there were. I think we're done here. She turned and practically ran to her SUV, not waiting for them. Caleb looked at the camera, then at me. He looked like a trapped animal, realizing the cage door had just slammed shut. You'll regret this, Sierra spat, tears of rage in her eyes. When you're all alone and dying in this house, remember this moment. I will, I said, my voice steady. I'll remember it as the day I finally stood up to you. They retreated to the silver sedan, tires spinning on the asphalt as they sped away. I stood in the garden, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching them go. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just sad and ready for whatever came next. The summons came 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon. I was expecting it. Loretta had warned me that the incident in the garden would force their hand. They were desperate, and desperate people don't de-escalate, they double down. A process server knocked on my door. A polite young man who handed me a thick envelope, apologized, and left. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. The language was dense, legal, and dehumanizing. Petition for emergency guardianship. In the matter of Alina Vance, an incapacitated person. Petitioner, Caleb Vance, alleges that the respondent, Alina Vance, suffers from advanced cognitive decline, paranoia, and an inability to manage her financial and personal affairs. There it was, in black and white. My son was asking a judge to strip me of my rights. He wanted control of my body, my bank accounts, and my home. If he won, he could place me in a facility against my will. He could sell the house. He could erase my entire life with a signature. The hearing was set for October 17th. I called Loretta. It's here, I said. I'm on my way, she replied. By that evening, my dining room table was a war room again. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was no shock. There was only cold, hard determination. They have nothing, Loretta said, reviewing the petition. This affidavit from Dr. Sterling is weak. She claims observed paranoia but cites no specific medical tests. It's hearsay disguised as a diagnosis. But they have a lawyer, I said. Julian Thorne. Thorne is a junior associate. Loretta scoffed. He's out of his depth. We're going to bury them in paper, Alina. We spent the next week assembling our defense with military precision. First, the asterisk medical evidence asterisk. I went to my own doctor, Dr. Patel, who had known me for 15 years. He conducted a full cognitive evaluation. The results were perfect. Patient exhibits superior cognitive function for her age group. No signs of dementia or decline. Next, the asterisk financial evidence asterisk asterisk. We printed 5 years of bank statements. Every bill paid on time. Savings intact. Investments growing. It was a portrait of fiscal responsibility that stood in stark contrast to Caleb's disastrous credit report. Then, the character witnesses asterisk. The affidavits poured in. Beatrice Klein, asterisk, Alina is the sharpest mind in our book club. She remembers plot details from books we read 10 years ago. The head librarian, asterisk, Mrs. Vance manages the scheduling for our literacy volunteers. She is organized, reliable, and indispensable. Walter from the support group, asterisk, she is a pillar of strength for all of us. But our ace in the hole was the asterisk asterisk video asterisk. Loretta watched the footage from the garden on my laptop. She watched Caleb scream about being drowning. She watched Sierra call me a selfish old woman. She watched Dr. Sterling try to manipulate me and then flee when the camera was revealed. Loretta sat back, a terrifyingly satisfied smile on her face. Oh, this is beautiful. This isn't just a defense, Alina. This is an indictment. The night before the hearing, the house was quiet. Loretta had gone home to prepare her opening statement. I sat in the study, holding a framed photograph of Arthur. It was taken on our 25th anniversary. We were laughing, squinting into the sun. I tried, Artie, I whispered to the photo. I tried to raise him right. A wave of grief washed over me, not for the house or the money, but for the son I had lost. The Caleb who existed in my memories, the boy who learned to ride a bike in this driveway, the young man who called me every Sunday, was gone. He had been consumed by the man who filed this petition, a man who saw his mother not as a person, but as an asset to be liquidated. I allowed myself to cry for exactly 10 minutes. I mourned the relationship. I mourned the future I thought I'd have with my grandchildren. Then I wiped my face. If I lost tomorrow, I lost everything. I would become a ward of the state, or worse, a ward of Caleb. I would be locked away in Sunset Gardens while Sierra redecorated my home. I put the photo back on the desk. No, I said aloud. I went upstairs and laid out my outfit for court. My navy suit, my pearl earrings, the shoes that pinched a little but made me stand taller. I wasn't going to court as a victim. I was going as Alina Vance, homeowner, survivor, mother. And I was going to win. The county courthouse smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a low, headache-inducing hum that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. I sat at the defense table next to Loretta, my hands folded in my lap to hide a slight tremor. Across the aisle, Caleb and Sierra sat with Julian Thorne. They looked picture-perfect. Caleb in a charcoal suit, Sierra in a modest navy dress, her hair pulled back. They looked like the victims. They looked like the concerned family. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Regina Holt swept into the room. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a demeanor that suggested she suffered no fools. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and looked down at the files. In the matter of the emergency guardianship of Alina Vance, she read. She looked up. Mr. Thorne, proceed. Julian Thorne stood up. He was more confident today than he had been in my living room. Your Honor, he began, this is a heartbreaking case. Mr. Vance seeks guardianship of his mother solely out of deep concern for her safety. Mrs. Vance is living alone in a large property she can no longer maintain. She has become increasingly paranoid, isolating herself from family, refusing medical assessments, and exhibiting hostility toward the very people trying to help her. He called his first witness, Dr. Lydia Sterling. Dr. Sterling took the stand, looking every inch the aggrieved professional. She described our encounter in the garden, but it was twisted, like looking at a reflection in a funhouse mirror. Mrs. Vance was agitated and aggressive, Dr. Sterling testified, smoothing her skirt. When I attempted a simple conversation, she became defensive. She accused her son of conspiracy. This type of irrational suspicion, believing loved ones are enemies, is a classic hallmark of cognitive decline. Did she allow you to assess her? Julian asked. She ordered me off the property and threatened me, Dr. Sterling sighed. It was quite disturbing. My knuckles turned white. Loretta placed a calming hand on my arm. Wait, she whispered. Then Caleb took the stand. It was the performance of a lifetime. He spoke softly, his voice thick with emotion. He described the house as crumbling around me. He described me as confused and frail. I just want Mom to be safe, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. She's all alone in that big house. She barely leaves. When I tried to talk to her about downsizing, she snapped. She thinks I'm trying to hurt her. It breaks my heart, Your Honor. I just want to take care of her like she took care of me. He omitted the loan. He omitted the credit card debt. He omitted the Maldives. Thank you, Mr. Vance, Julian said softly. Your witness. Loretta stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She walked straight toward the witness stand, moving like a shark in dark water. Mr. Vance, she began, her voice pleasant but sharp. You testified that you acted out of concern for your mother's safety. Is that correct? Yes, Caleb said, sniffing. And that is why you hired movers to go to her house, without her permission. I made a mistake, Caleb stammered, glancing at his lawyer. I was desperate to get her into a safer environment. A mistake, Loretta repeated. Mr. Vance, let's talk about the vacation, the trip to the Maldives. Caleb straightened his tie. We canceled that trip, as I told my mother. We realized her health was the priority. You canceled it, Loretta asked, so there is no trip planned. No, Caleb said firmly. Absolutely not. I would like to remind you that you are under oath, Loretta said, her eyes narrowing. I know that, Caleb snapped. We canceled it. Loretta walked back to our table and picked up a stack of papers. Your Honor, I would like to submit Defense Exhibit C. She handed a file to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge and to Julian Thorne. These are screenshots from the public Instagram account of Sierra Vance, Loretta announced. Dated 2 weeks ago. Mr. Vance, can you read the caption on the top post? Caleb stared at the paper, his face drained of color. Read it, please, Judge Holt ordered. Caleb's voice was a whisper. Can't keep a good girl down. Rescheduled our dream trip for November. Maldives, here we come. Second chance luxury living. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Sierra put her hand over her face. So, Loretta said, her voice rising, you didn't cancel the trip. You merely postponed it. Is that correct? Sierra just posted that to save face, Caleb stammered. And this, Loretta held up another document. This is a credit card statement for a joint account co-signed by Alina Vance. It shows a payment plan initiated 10 days ago to Tropical Dreams Resort to retain the booking. You are still paying for it. Wait. And this, Loretta slapped another document down on the railing. A foreclosure notice for your townhouse, and a letter from your employer regarding a disciplinary review for an unauthorized loan. Julian Thorne looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He hadn't known about the foreclosure. Mr. Vance, Loretta said, leaning in, you aren't here because your mother is losing her mind. You are here because you are losing your money. You need her equity to bail you out. Isn't that the truth? No, Caleb shouted, standing up. I'm trying to help her. She's selfish. She has all that money sitting there doing nothing. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Judge Holt barked. Caleb collapsed back into the chair, realizing what he had just screamed. No further questions, Loretta said, turning her back on him. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand. I felt the eyes of everyone in the room on me. I took the oath. I sat down. Mrs. Vance, Loretta asked gently, how is your health? It is excellent, I said. I submitted my physical from Dr. Patel. And your finances? I pay every bill on time. I have zero debt, unlike my son. Why do you believe we are here today, Alina? I looked at Caleb. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on his cuff. We are here, I said, my voice ringing clear in the silent courtroom, because I refused to let him steal my home to pay for his vacation. I took a breath. I love my son. I have loved him every day of his life, but I will not allow him to dismantle my life to fund a lifestyle he cannot afford. I am not a resource to be mined. I am a person, and I am perfectly capable of saying no. Thank you, Mrs. Vance, Loretta said. Judge Holt didn't need a recess. She didn't need to deliberate. She looked at the papers in front of her, then she looked at Caleb with an expression of pure disdain. I have reviewed all evidence presented, Judge Holt said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife, and I find absolutely no merit in this petition. She took off her glasses. Mrs. Vance is clearly competent, financially stable, and living independently without issue. The only dysfunction I see here lies with the petitioner. She pointed a pen at Caleb. Mr. Vance, using the court system to harass your mother because you are in financial distress is reprehensible. Filing frivolous guardianship petitions to gain access to assets constitutes a form of elder abuse. Caleb flinched as if he'd been slapped. I am denying this petition with prejudice, Judge Holt ruled. Furthermore, I am ordering the petitioner to pay all of Mrs. Vance's legal fees. And given the evidence of financial coercion and the misuse of a co-signed credit instrument, I am referring this case to Adult Protective Services for an immediate investigation into financial exploitation. Your Honor, Julian Thorne gasped. We are adjourned. Judge Holt slammed her gavel down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I sat there for a moment, the relief washing over me so intensely I felt lightheaded. Loretta squeezed my shoulder. We won, Alina. We won everything. I stood up. Across the aisle, Caleb was sitting with his head in his hands. He looked small, defeated. Sierra was sobbing openly now, real, ugly tears of panic as the reality of the judge's words set in. APS investigation, elder abuse. Their lives as they knew them were over. I didn't gloat. I didn't say anything to them. I simply picked up my purse, straightened my blazer, and walked out of the courtroom. I walked past my son and his wife, past their expensive lawyer, and out into the hallway. I walked with my head held high. I was Alina Vance, and I was free. The wheels of justice turn slowly, they say, but when they finally catch traction, they can crush everything in their path. The Adult Protective Services investigation moved swiftly. 2 weeks after the hearing, a caseworker named Carmen Ortiz sat at my dining room table. She was kind, thorough, and visibly disgusted by what she found in the files Loretta had compiled. Mrs. Vance, Carmen said, closing a folder. What your son attempted constitutes clear financial exploitation. Because he holds a license in financial services, we are legally required to report these findings to his regulatory body and his employer. I hadn't thought about that. I just wanted my house safe. But actions have consequences, and for Caleb, they were catastrophic. In the world of finance, fiduciary trust is everything. When the partners at his firm received the notification that Caleb Vance was under investigation for attempting to defraud a vulnerable senior, his own mother, the decision was immediate. He was fired for cause, effective immediately. No severance package, no golden parachute, just a security guard escorting him out of the building with a cardboard box of personal items. Sierra wasn't spared either. Real estate runs on reputation, and news travels fast in suburban networks. While the state board didn't revoke her license immediately, the whispers were enough. Clients pulled listings. Buyers requested new agents. Her brokerage, wanting to distance themselves from the scandal of elder fraud, quietly let her go. The dominoes fell in rapid succession. The Maldives trip was canceled, but the resort refused a refund. They kept the $47,000 as per the strict cancellation policy. That debt remained on the credit card, gathering interest like moss. Then came the call from the bank regarding their townhouse. Without Caleb's inflated income, the mortgage was unsustainable. The foreclosure notice I had seen in court became a reality. They lost the sleek, modern home they had leveraged their souls for. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental apartment on the other side of town, a far cry from the luxury they had felt entitled to. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, sitting in my quiet house, I mostly felt a heavy, dull ache. I had saved myself, yes, but I had watched my son destroy his own life in the process. 3 months after the court hearing, I found a plain white envelope in my mailbox. There was no stamp. It had been hand-delivered. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I almost threw it away. Loretta had advised against direct contact, but curiosity won out. I opened it standing in the driveway. Mom, we lost everything. The house, our jobs, our friends. Everyone looks at us like we're criminals. Sierra's parents won't even speak to us. We're living in a rental, barely making ends meet. I know you think I deserve this. Maybe I do. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you. I was desperate. I was drowning and I made terrible choices. I'm not asking for money. I miss you. Caleb. I read it twice. It was a masterpiece of missing the point. I was desperate. I made terrible choices. Not, I'm sorry I betrayed you. Not, I'm sorry I tried to gaslight you into thinking you were senile. It was a non-apology. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry he was suffering. I handed the letter to Loretta the next day. Draw up the final settlement, I said. The deal was simple. Caleb would sign a document formally waiving any and all future claims to my estate. He would agree not to contest my will. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue civil damages for the emotional distress and legal fees beyond what the judge had ordered. And one more condition, I told Loretta. What? He has to complete a court-mandated financial counseling program, and he has to send me the certificate of completion. If he is ever going to rebuild his life, he needs to learn to live within his means. I won't give him fish, Loretta, but I'll force him to learn how to use a fishing rod. The papers were signed 2 weeks later. Life moved on. The silence in the house stopped feeling like emptiness and started feeling like peace. I heard updates occasionally, usually through the grapevine. Martha, whose network of informants was better than the FBI, told me that Caleb and Sierra's marriage was crumbling under the strain of poverty. She saw them at the grocery store, Martha whispered during book club. They were arguing in the cereal aisle about the price of generic flakes. Sierra looked tired. The highlights are gone. 6 months later, I received one final letter from Caleb. Hope you're happy, it read, the scrawl angry and jagged. You have your big house and your lawyer and your money. Was it worth it? Was it worth destroying your only son? We're barely surviving while you live in luxury. I guess you wanted to punish me. You win. I stood over the recycling bin in my kitchen. I didn't feel anger this time, just pity. He still didn't get it. He still thought he was the victim. I dropped the letter into the bin. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say to a stranger. Instead, I focused on living. I used a portion of my savings, the money Caleb had coveted so badly, to finally renovate the house. But I didn't do it for resale value. I did it for me. I tore out the old back porch and built a beautiful, glass-walled sunroom. It was filled with light, plants, and comfortable reading chairs. It became my favorite place to drink coffee and watch the seasons change. And I started dadding again. His name was Silas Finch. He was a retired history professor I met at the library. He wore tweed jackets, smelled like old books and peppermint, and had a laugh that made me feel 20 years younger. On our third date, Silas looked around my living room and said, "You have a lovely home, Alina. It feels cherished." He didn't ask about the square footage. He didn't ask about the property taxes. He just liked the way the light hit the bookshelves. He liked me for me, not for my assets. It was refreshing. It was healing. 1 year after the nightmare began, I met with Loretta to finalize my legacy. "Are you sure about this?" Loretta asked, pen poised over the new will. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. I established the Alina Vance Foundation for Elder Financial Protection. Upon my death, the house on Maple Street would be sold. Every penny of the proceeds, along with my investments, would go to the foundation. It would provide legal assistance and education to seniors facing financial abuse by family members. Caleb would receive nothing. He had already proven what he would do with an inheritance. I was choosing to leave my money to people who actually needed protection. I framed the foundation documents and hung them in my study, right next to the photo of Arthur. He would have approved, I thought. He always said I was stronger than I looked. The story ends on a warm Saturday evening in late September. I hosted a garden party to christen the new sunroom. The backyard was strung with twinkling fairy lights. The hydrangeas were in full, glorious bloom. 50 people filled my home. My book club sisters, Bea, Martha, and June, were holding court near the punch bowl, laughing raucously. Loretta was there, toasting with a glass of champagne. Silas was by my side, his hand warm in mine. I stood on the steps of the sunroom and looked out at the scene. My home was filled with love, real love, the kind that shows up when things are hard, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. Someone asked me recently if I regretted how things ended with Caleb, if I wished I had just given in, sold the house, and kept the peace. I looked around at my beautiful life, hard-won and fiercely protected. Not for a second, I said softly. Because here is the truth I learned. Your children, your relatives, your blood, they don't own you. They don't own your labor, your savings, or your peace of mind. Love is not a transaction, and it certainly isn't a hostage situation. I fought for my life. I fought for my dignity. And standing there in the golden hour light, surrounded by friends who became family, I knew I had won the only thing that mattered. My freedom.